Alright, I managed to help the bugs eating everything, for now. Put Robo Grandpa back to bed, for now. And discipline my evil-ass nephew, for now. Next up I need to convince the sisters of battle that Bone Daddy does in fact not invoke the Emperor's power.
My Primarch, we have a problem.
By the not God Emperor, watch now.
Sir, Ghazghkull is attacking our position.
Oh, it should be fine. Who says he's just an orc war boss, right? Come here, you blue git! What the hell is that?
The Orc Prophet, sir.
That's not an orc, that's something else. Wait, did you say prophet? No one a lip wagon, I'm soaking over ya! Holy mother of Hetzel!
Salutations Rangers, General Rally 101 back again with some more lore. The Primarchs are one of the most unique aspects of Warhammer, and everyone has at least one Primarch they like, partly due to just how powerful they really are. And with them being so mighty, it's no small surprise that they are often the yardstick to measure other characters, to see if they are indeed on Primarch level. And one such contender is none other than the biggest, the greenest, the meanest, the orkiest ork to ever zog and zog, ya get. The one and only Ghazghkull Mug Ork Thraka, prophet of both the Gork and Mork. Gotta fucking love orcs. Yeah, that begs the question, does the biggest, the greenest, and the meanest, does the prophet of the Ork War really have the cojones needed to take on a full-blooded son of the Emperor? Well, in today's video, we're gonna find out. So without any further ado, lads and lassies, ladies and gentle peoples, let's get cracking on with today's video. Alright, so before we can answer, is Ghazghkull as strong as a Primarch, we need to first establish just how powerful is a Primarch. And this is one of those things where it's somewhat hard, because what exactly do you mean by power? So in today's video, we're going to be taking a much more holistic aspect to it. I'm going to be covering 3 different feats from 3 different Primarchs in 3 given categories, showing the full width and breadth of Primarch powers. Because I feel like that's the best way to take a look at it. Because the Primarchs and of themselves are not uniform. In terms of physical strength, you have Primarchs like Conrad and Afaris who are at the very bottom rung of the tier, but then you have those on the exact opposite, such as Ferris and Vulcan. But even the weakest Primarch can still absolutely dogpile a Space Marine. So by taking this more holistic aspect, we can truly establish a general power setting. If there is such a bloody thing in 40k, because well, sometimes it just doesn't make any sense, but hey, you come here for bullshit, not for logic and reasoning. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, you live short and suffer. But enough with the sci-fi IP dick measuring contest, and let's take a look at our first example. That being strength, or none other than Mr. Angry Wrong, the Primarch of the 12th Legion, the Eaters of Worlds. So this example comes from us from the world of Armatura. Armatura was a very important system in Ultramar, being the main recruitment ground for the Ultramarines. Thus, the Shadow Crusade, the joint word bearer as well as World Eater assault on the Ultramar system needed to cripple it. And during the fight, the 2 Primarchs, Lorgar and Angron, would lead the spearhead. During this time, however, they would be separated from their forces, and an opportunistic Titan pilot would decide that the best way to kill a son of the Emperor is the good old bug method. But the poor princeps were soon made aware why Primarchs are so goddamn special. Taken from Betrayer. The Warhound shook, unbalanced with one leg in the air. Great gears in the war machine's knee and hip protested with rough mechanical coughs. Get the leg down. Finish it, Delntier ordered. Elias gave the control levers another wrenching shove. Something's obstructing us. Kay lifted his targeting visor again, looking out the Warhound's left eye windshield. He took a slow breath and glanced back at his princeps. My princeps, the World Eaters in the ruins. They're cheering? The bleeding demigod had torn his way through the ground, giving voice to his resurrection with a bellow nothing short of ursine. Gore sheeted him, painting him in dark, rich, red wetness. He threw his axes away, ruined and never to be wielded again, and breathed freedom into his lungs. It smelled of melted glass and felt like sunburn. Lorgar! He spat blood as he said the name. Rising to his feet at last, the word-bearer lifted a scalded hand, not for aid, but in warning. Angron had no time to lift his mutilated brother sprawled at his feet. The sun went dark as night falling in an instant. He turned, raising his arms, and took a machine guard's weight on his shoulders. Every muscle in his body looked tighter than the iron trying to crush him. Drool streamed through his metal teeth, skin knuckled white as he defied the will of a titan. He gave a bear's roar as the foot lowered another half meter. Sinews cracked in his shoulder. His broken boots skidded on the patch of unglassed rock. Something cracked in his spine. Something else cracked in his left knee The compression of his bones sounded like twigs breaking underfoot, which was a vivid burst of imagination he did not appreciate. But you could hear his men cheering. You could hear them howling as they killed and crying his name. He blinked to clear away sweat's greasy sting and dug his boots into the ground. With a smile splitting across his broken angel face, he shifted his slipping blood-slick grip on the Titan's clawed foot and started pushing back. "Lorca!" Angron spoke in something that wasn't quite a growl, but wasn't quite a laugh. "Get up! I can't hold this forever." Now, I know many people have said this before and made a big deal about this, but I'm gonna do this again because my brother who art in the Emperor of Mankind, do you even lift? You're out here complaining about getting one plate each side for an overhead press. My boy Angron out here fully overhead pressing a goddamn war on Titan. Homie did not give the slightest fuck. But aside from the epic, pure, sheer and utter badassness of such a feat as overhead pressing a fucking Warhound Titan, here we can see the sheer physical strength and might of a Primarch. Because yes, well indeed, he's not exactly having the most easiest time in the world, and he's definitely gonna need a chiropractor visit after all this nonsense. He's able to hold it long enough for Lorca to get away before taking care of it. And ladies and gentlemen, being able to hold off a god machine with your bare hands is certainly a feat of strength worthy of a demigod. Yet in the world of Warhammer 40k, physical strength is indeed very important, but it's not the end-all and be-all. Because whilst physical might is king in the materium, psychic might is lord of the Empyrean, and there is none more psychically powerful than Magnus, the Red, Primarch of the 15th Legion, Thousand Sons. Now yes, well, Magnus is indeed the most psychically powerful of all Primarchs, so whatever feats he can achieve is not exactly replicatable by other Primarchs. Each Primarch possesses some type of psychic might. So whilst this isn't something that every Primarch can do, it gives a glimpse into what is possible. Simple, this is the greatest feat, reduce it, and then you have the most minor. And then we can get a good ballpark for what exactly a normal Primarch can do. That normal, if there is a normal thing as a Primarch, which there fucking isn't. I'm getting sidetracked. And the greatest feat of Magnus the Red was shattering the psychic walls of the Webway, things that were erected by the Emperor of Mankind, the strongest psyker to ever exist in all of humanity. Not to mention everything else in relation to the Aldari, which is millennia older, and that even further beyond to the Old Ones. And Magnus, well, he was able to take care of it. Then he felt it, the familiar sense of something titanic moving in the swells around him, a continent adrift in the ocean with the ancient sentience buried in its etheric heart. Infinite spectra of light danced before him, more magnificent than the most radiant Mechanicum Borealis. Even to one as mighty as Magnus, the flaring eruption of light and power was incredible. Its communication was sibilant, like sand pouring through the neck of an hourglass. It had breadth and depth, yet no beginning and no end. Though it had always existed around him, and always would. It spoke, not with words, but with power. It surrounded him, offering itself freely and without ulterior motive. The great ocean was truly a place of contradictions, its roiling infinite nature allowing for the presence of all things, good and bad. Just as some entities within its depths were malicious and predatory, others were benevolent and altruistic. Contrary to what most people believed, there was uncorrupted power here that could be wielded by those with the knowledge and skill to do so. Such gifted individuals were few and far between, but through the work of adepts like Magnus, it might yet be possible to lift humanity to a golden age of exploration and the acquisition of knowledge. Magnus drank deep of the power it offered and tore his way through the golden lattice. He felt a shrieking wail of unmaking as a scream of pain. Without a second thought, he flew into the shivering passageway, following a route he knew would lead to terror. Now in hindsight, we can see that Magnus' hubris of, oh no wait, there are good warp things, was complete and utter bullshit. But he really did get what he deserved. Regardless of how dumb Magnus may have been, his ability to manifest and manipulate that power is indeed something very, very, very real. And again, Magnus is the most psychically powerful Primarch, but you take that in relation to the other Primarchs. Magnus was able to shatter wards made by the Emperor, and we consider that other Primarchs have an incredible resistance and connection to the warp in equal measure. I believe that it's safe to say that when it comes to psychic powers, even a Primarch who is so vehemently against it, like Mortarion, was able to fully control and master psychic power. When he accepted it, mind you. So whilst not all Primarchs are willing to grasp and accept the psychic power, they already have the ability. They have everything that they can do, if they choose to. So in terms of psychic potential, Primarchs are indeed demigods of a different caliber altogether. But we talked about physical might, we've talked about psychic might, but what about mental might? Some would argue is the most powerful. The last one that people would argue is the most important, because many things are strong, many things are psychically powerful, but very few people and very few things can be said to be truly smart. One that exemplifies this maxim incredibly perfect is none other than Rabute Guilliman, Primarch of the 13th Legion, Ultramarines. And most every single Primarch is smart. Guilliman in particular is just something different. And just as Magnus represents the height of psychic powers, and Angron the height of physical powers, Guilliman represents the height of mental fortitude and mental ability. And yeah, he's pretty good at what he does. Taken from No Fear. Guilliman does not look up. He makes another mark with his stylus. Data scrolls across hololithic plates, unobserved to his left. Gage clears his throat. We had no wish to disturb you, Primarch, but there is much to do, Guilliman finishes. He glances at his first master. I have been watching the data stream, Marius. Did you think I hadn't? Gage smiles. Never for a moment, sir. 100 labors simultaneously. The Primarch's ability to multitask was almost frightening. We wanted to make sure you caught every detail, says Empion of the 9th. Youngest of them, newest of them. Gage covers a smile. The poor fool still hasn't learned to not underestimate the Primarch. I believe I have, Empion, says Guilliman. The Samothras requires further engine certification. I have told Shipmaster Kolok to divert servitors to orbital slip 1123. Yes, Empion. I had seen that. I had seen that the Militus is 8,200 tons overladen, and suggest the shipyard's chief reassign the 41st Espandor to the high ascent. Their old province muster is running 6 minutes behind schedule, so when Donus needs to get Sensual en route to increase handling rates at Numinous Port, 6 minutes will expand over the next 2 days. Polyphraxis needs to get his ship in line. Karen Province is actually timed ahead of schedule, so compliments to Captain Turon of the 135th. However, I doubt he has accommodated the rainstorm predicted for later this afternoon, so he needs to be aware that the surface conditions will deteriorate. Now again, many people are rolling their eyes because one, this is Guilliman and the Ultramarines, and some people just don't like to accept that they are really good at what they do. Fuck you. Second is because this is not as flashy as the other two feats. But again, it's very important. Being strong is one thing, but having the ability and the capability to utilize that strength is something completely other. And again, Guilliman is literally observing every single task here that's going on in this muster of 2 legions and all their accompanying personnel. And it's not just that he's doing all this, he is observing everything down to the minute, to the most minuscule degree. When I say that he sees everything, I am not exaggerating. He literally sees every second of every minute. I mean, hell, even the Mechanicus compare him to one of their data servos. He literally has a brain that is being compared to machines. And yes, Guilliman is the most extreme value, but I guarantee you, even Chewin Rock's Angron over there could think like that if he wanted to. If he needed to. Of course, for Angron specifically, it might be harder because, he's missing half his fucking brain. But regardless of who, what, when, where, or why, even the most stupid of all Primarchs is one of the greatest and most intelligent beings of all mankind. And truly, each and every one of them possesses the wit and intelligence of a demigod. Though some more than others, but hell, you could say that about anything. Alright, ladies and gents, we have a rough idea of just exactly how strong a Primarch is in every single aspect. Now we can take a look at Mr. Ghazghkull, Mark Thraka, and see if he can compete with the sons of the— No, he can't! He's so dumb! Which video's so stupid? He died to Ragnar Blackmate, a Space Marine captain. He's a wolf. You're just dumb, stupid, bad, I hate, You done? Baby. Cool. Remember the time Vulcan bit that— Alright, as my interesting acquaintance over there pointed out, and many of you might have pointed out, or at least thought, and wait until the video end if you were good people, this whole thing seems kinda moot when a Space Marine captain managed to kill Gaz. Space Marine captains are nowhere even close to a Primarch in any way, shape, or form at all. So the fact that Ghazghkull was taken down by one means that we should already know the answer. Gaz could never defeat a Primarch. But that, like all things in Warhammer 40k, is only the surface level. And in this case, there is far, far, far more to the story. And the implications that it may have might indeed mean the end for the entirety of the Imperium of Man as a whole. But for those of you who don't exactly know what I'm talking about, Ragnar Blackmane, a captain of the Space Wolf Space Marine chapter, would indeed engage in a duel with none other than the Prophet of the Wa, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka. So before I get into it, a little bit of a TLDR for Ghazghkull. Ghazghkull is indeed the greatest orc to ever exist, and as his title suggests, he is believed to be the Prophet of Gork and Mork, the twin gods of the warp of the orcs. One is brutal yet cunning, but the other is cunning yet brutal, and it is believed by many an orc that the gods speak through him, and that they call for a Wa to end all Was, which has led to multiple wars on the planet of Armageddon, and its confrontation and his famous rivalry with none other than Commissar Sebastian Yarrick, the old man of Armageddon. I'm still waiting for that grudge match, because that's going to be a hell of a fight. It would be during such one of these battles that the Space Wolves and the Orcs would fight, and here, after a duel, Ragnar Blackmane would be incredibly wounded, but he would manage to kill the great war boss. This would then result in Ghazghkull being reborn, as well as Ragnar Blackmane, with Ragnar being reborn as a Primarchs and Ghazghkull being reborn as something much more powerful, shall I say. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and I've done enough explaining. Here's the moment in question that many people have been wondering about, taken from Ghazghkull, the Prophet of the Wa. Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka stands on the raised dais of the cathedral's altar, towering above those statues which still stand in the desolation around him. And as a void ship's death high above casts a mantle of green plasma light over his colossal form, he throws his head back and roars in holy triumph. But there is a second giant, pacing in a wide circle beyond the reach of your lord and master. It is Ragnar Blackmane. He wields the relic blade Frostfang with skill of centuries. Although you do not know that. You merely note that he is waving a chainsword of unparalleled size. As the Wolf Lord stalks his quarry, you see the ripples spread from his boots, and you fear it to be your master's blood. But then you see it. The hydraulic feeds of his armor have been slashed, one by one, and have made a foul lake on the dais. This is scant comfort to you, however. You are reminded of the prophet's slaying of the warlord Dremsk, long ago, in which the larger orc had been made vulnerable by the slow crippling of his armor. The towering battle harness worn by your lord is more like a building than it is armor. It is of a mass beyond your imagining, and now you dread that Dremsk's fate will be returned upon his executioner. But Ghazghkull is not Dremsk. The prophet curls his lips back from fangs as long as your arms, and in a voice as thick and black as the spilled hydraulic fluid at his feet, he taunts Blackmane in the tongue of men. Finish this! It is a command for an ending, but the orc who speaks for the gods sounds more as if he is impatient for something to begin. Either way, the Wolf Lord obliges. Thinking his foe hobbled, he sprints up the steps at the dais' edge, boosts himself up from the shorn stone of a martyr statue, and leaps in a soaring arc towards his foe. Ghazghkull lunges. That he moves at all under such a weight of steel is unfathomable, but that he moves with such speed is unthinkable. It is a miracle to you. As the tower of his body surges forward, he plants one mighty iron foot upon the altar of the Emperor himself, and he too propels himself into a leap. Ragnar's bolter erupts in a storm of point-blank fire, spraying explosive bolts into the prophet's face as they sail towards each other. But so thick is his skin and so dense is the bone underneath, it may as well have been a handful of sand. The two giants collide and crash into the nave with a thunderous clashing of plate. There is a brief but savage struggle, and then they rise, locked in an mortal embrace. Ghazghkull's great jagged cage of a claw is clamped fully around Ragnar's torso, and as you hear ceramite splinter from beneath its closing, you shriek in exultation. But then you see it. Frostfang has been driven, point first into the prophet's neck. The relic's vicious teeth have been jammed by the thickness of his hide, but already they are juddering as the motor whines to free them, and scraps of rubbery skin are beginning to be thrown free of the wound. As your cry of triumph descends into a moan of horror, you scramble to extricate yourself from the stone and run to your master's side, but the gap is too narrow. Maybe 3 Makaris ago, when you had been a runt of incredible feebleness, you might have been able to make it through, but in this form you are struck fast, with just your head free, with one arm reaching out in futile desperation. There's a tremendous wet crack, as the blade thumb of the prophet's claw punches through Ragnar's breastplate, spilling with a thick curtain of the Wolf Lord's heart blood. It is a mortal wound. But in the same instant, a great rope of snarl-twisted skin is torn free from Ghazghkull's wound, and Frostfang's teeth leap into a furious blur of motion. Even as you struggle in vain, the blade chews through the thick leg tendons of your master's neck. And then, in a great spray of chipped bone and pulverized flesh, his spine is severed. With his last gasp of breath, the prophet speaks a single phrase into dying Ragnar's face, but you do not hear it over your own wails of despair. The head of Ghazghkull Thraka falls to the floor. It lands on the adamantium plate that seals his holy wound, and the shock of the impact reverberates around the whole cathedral. It is enough, in fact, to jog the statue's head that props up the tunnel you're trapped in. With a heavy muted thud, the huge stone block above you falls flat. The cathedral's nave begins to spin wildly, and you spend a few moments wondering why this is, until you realize you cannot feel your body anymore, as your head comes to rest after rolling a short way across the nave. You blink the masonry dust from your eyes. Your vision is fading fast, but before it entirely goes, you see just one last vision, as you gaze involuntarily up at the stairs of the dais. Ragnar is standing, shakily on the ruins of the prophet, with a ghastly rent in his chest. He is swaying, barely keeping his feet beneath him. In one hand he holds aloft the head of a Ghazghkull Thraka, and before the green rises up from the black to take you, you see that your master's tusks are set in a great, triumphant grin, and you know that all will be well. So, from this, there are two very important points I'd like to take away. Specifically, Gaz says, finish this, which is odd for an orc. Again, whilst Gaz is indeed more intelligent than an orc, he's still an orc. He wants a good fight, and the last thing an orc wants is for a fight to be finished. Secondly, he's happy about this. He smiles at the end. Now, immediately some people are going to be jumping, saying, oh no, that's just cope. Now, I would be a bit more agreeable to this if we didn't get further information. Because you see, we get an aftermath of this further in this own book, but also in the Mad Doc Grotsnik book. Grotsnik, Mad Doc. And here we begin to understand truly what Gaz is. Because his connection to the prophets, to the gods of the orcs, is very, very, very real. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Because in the same book where that excerpt is from, we get an understanding that Gaz is literally being able to communicate with the orc gods. But in essence, they basically tell him, you need to get yourself killed by Blackmane. It is the will of the gods. But why? Why on earth would the orc gods want their greatest champion to lose to such a minor character in the grand scheme of things? But why? And that's because the way that Gaz draws his power. But how does he draw his power? Well, I could explain it to you, but I think the Mad Doc over there would do a much better job than I could. You've got plenty of grots to fetch and carry for you, I said while gesturing at the creatures walking away on the scaffold. Why go bother of getting your least favorite grot sicked out of the Great Green for the job? Grotsnik growled then, but it was the sort of growl an orc makes when he's knackered from thinking too much, rather than a threat. Because, as mad as it sounds, Makari, I think you're the only creature who really knew Ghazghkull. I've spent years trying to get closer than you, and yet I never managed. It's cause you spent all that time causing him pain, I hissed, bunching my fists into pathetic little modules of meat. I've always served the boss, and the gods. You just want to drive him mental, and make him into some giant freak to do your bidding, or just amuse you. Said Grotsnik calmly, picking at a bit of rotten meat from between his tusks as he nodded. You don't deny it then? I said, not sure what to make of that. Nah, said Grotsnik. I thought it was obvious, really. I just liked experimenting on things, and hurting them. He stretched then, and his shoulder, which had grown hunched from all the time he'd spent bent over Ghazghkull's skull, made a sick-sounding cracking noise. But I was serving the gods, in my own way. What, by driving the greatest orc alive mad? For a laugh? Come off it, Grotsnik. All that time with Ghazghkull, he scorned, shaking his long, cruel face in disapproval. And you never worked out that his strength sprang entirely from his madness? Did you not see how, as I worked deeper and deeper in his skull, the gods spoke even louder? And now, the louder they spoke, the greater Gaz's feats became. Mkari, Ghazghkull's pain, was his power. I hated how much sense that made. And as I looked up at the great dead mountain of a face above us, I realized it was as true as anything could be. If that's true, I said as Ghazghkull hauled down a big lever, and then the generator came to life with a shriek of captured lightning. Then, what'd you need me for? Because I think you helped him live with the pain, said Ghazghkull. It was almost a whisper, like he suspected the bosses outside might overhear him now. I hate you, Grot. You hate me. But why do you think we as a species paint black and white check marks over everything we can get our hands on? 'Cause they look really killy? I ventured, knowing it was the right answer. Well, the same reason we got 2 gods, wretch, spat Ghazghkull. Contrast. The Great Green is one thing, but to make the whole, I suppose you could say it takes all sorts. And Ghazghkull is what Ghazghkull is today, Or rather, what he was, until fighting Ragnar anyway. Because the both of us. Yeah? I said, unbunching my fists and crossing my arms, so he still knew I didn't trust him. Yeah. Who do you think installed the bionic eye in Dremsk? That meant he missed every shot he fired at Ghazghkull back in the rust spike. Just for example. Like it or not, Grot, and you won't like it. I've been just as much part of the God's plans as you have. All these years. And it's just as painful for me to swallow. But you're still as much of a part as I am. And whatever they got planned next. What's next then? I asked. No idea, said Ghazghkull with a grunt. He dragged an enormous cable from the generator to the scaffold where the prophet had been reassembled, and heaved into a socket as thick as his whole body. At least in the long run. But I know right now, it involves you coming over here and helping me pull this really, really big lever, so the boss can come back and figure out the rest. And here, ladies and gentlemen, we see unequivocally that Ghazghkull's power is tied to his madness. And in a sense, it somewhat makes sense. Most people think that orcs are illogical, and this is half true. They're illogical to us, but to an orc, it makes perfect sense. Orcs have their own logic, their own reasons, and their own beliefs. We saw right there in the excerpt. Why on earth do black and white checker marks go on everything? Because it makes them more killy. To an orc, that is logic. Red is fast, yellow is explosive, gold is rich. That is logic to an orc. Orcs operate in their own logic matrices. They have their own rules and structure. So whilst to us it may seem like nonsense, to an orc it makes perfect sense, because that is orc logic. To us it may be illogical, but it's still logic. Ghazghkull is an orc. Thus he is bound by the same rules, understanding and logic as all others of his species. Sorry, species. Was that necessary? Absolutely not, but it was funny. Oi, you got a license for that, stabber. So Gaz is bound by the same things that all other orcs are bound by. So then how on earth can he evolve into something beyond that? Simple. You break the logic. In other words, you make him mad. If an orc is mad, he can no longer be logical. If he's no longer logical, he's no longer bound by all the rules that contain an orc. To be an orc, meaning he can grow, he can develop, he can evolve. And that is why the gods want Ghazghkull to be in pain. And what more pain is there than death? Gaz's pain is tied to his power, because it breaks the logic and understanding of an orc and allows him to surpass and become something more. But how exactly does this work? How exactly does him being more mad gives him more power? And what power is this? The power, ladies and gentlemen, is quite simply very, very orky. Whilst the gods may have allowed Ghazghkull to die, they will never allow him to lose, because orcs never lose a fight. But again, the orcs themselves explain it much better, specifically the one who made Ghazghkull go mad. Talons burst from the back of its hand, tearing through flesh and spraying purple-tinged blood. Each was a foot long, and as Ghazghkull spun to bring his claw about, the black talons struck. Cables fraying at their touch. The Grand Warlord tried again, but his movements were sluggish, slowed. The abomination had damaged whatever systems powered his armor. Rather than enhancing Ghazghkull's strength, it now hampered him. Still, the creature clung to him, both its limbs now ending in bladed talons that slashed at the Grand Warlord. Ghazghkull bellowed in frustration, grasping at the beast. Even with his armor damage, he was probably the stronger, but that mattered little if he could not land a strike. "What have you done?" Volton whispered. "Done?" Grotznik asked, staring at him. "Well, I have followed my calling. I was once led to the creation of Ghazghkull. Now it leads somewhere else. That thing is not an orc." "You think Ghazghkull is?" Grotznik hissed as the titans grappled. "Maybe he was once, but no more. He's now a conduit to the green. A flesh vessel into which our collective psyche pools. He's just a bucket. A bucket with holes, I might add. For he's leaking all over the place." Volton was unsure of his meaning, but Grotznik was watching through the eyes of a Mork, perhaps through a word boy's gaze. The Grand Warlord looked different. The impact shattered bone and sprayed teeth. The weapon, already damaged, came apart on impact. But Ghazghkull simply brought his fist back, slamming it into the creature's face a second time. Again, the bone shattered, but the cracks seemed to fuse, its flesh flowing across its ruined face. Tendrils emerged from the wounds, grasping at wrists and armor alike, while newly erupted teeth sank into the Grand Warlord's forearms. He snarled, bellowed, the force of his voice driving the creature back. Its throat expanded, and a second spray of bile bursting from its tendril-lined maw, aimed squarely at the Grand Warlord's already burnt face. But it never reached him. Instead, the stream evaporated into wisps of fog mere inches from his skin. "No, that doesn't make sense," Grotznik murmured. "How is he doing that?" "Because he's Ghazghkull." "No," the doc said, slipping the eyes of Mork back into place. "It's because he is the green." And he was right. Volton could see it now, perfectly clear. Maybe Grotznik could see it too, though exactly what he perceived through the stolen eyes of Mork was anyone's guess. Ghazghkull was growing before their eyes. Not physically, perhaps, though the Grand Warlord had fully risen now, towering over the abomination. His claw still clasped about its wrist, but he was bigger somehow, bigger than stars, bigger than worlds. "Did you see it?" he asked. "Of course I saw it." Ghazghkull crumped him. "None of your tricks worked." "Oh, but they all worked," Grotznik replied. "I broke his weapons, hobbled him, had him beat." "Then why is he still standing?" "Because of the green," Grotznik said. "He was weakening, almost spent, bleeding out. But you saw it. When he bleeds, the green flows through him, sustains him, replaces what is lost. That's where his true power lies. Not in his muscles as strong as he is, nor in his weapons fancy as they might be, not even in his gunning, for it ain't even his mind anymore. He's a vessel, a conduit, a bucket." And here, ladies and gentlemen, we confirm something that is so incredibly scary and awesome at the same time. Ghazghkull Marg Uk Thraka, through all the amount of pain he has suffered, has allowed him to transform beyond a normal orc. He is something different. He is a literal vessel for the gods. The collective power of the green, that being the realm of warp where Gork and Mork inhabit, the sheer psychic power of orcish warp might directly flows through him. He is indeed a bucket that is constantly being filled and refilled with the power of the orc gods. And we see right here now, when Ghazghkull is fighting an abomination created by Grotznik, a so-called wrong orc, something that was made specifically to kill Ghazghkull, we see that the gods literally give him a power-up mid-fight. And they're able to do that by literally pouring more warp energy into him directly. This orc not only has a direct connection to the gods, he has a direct power line to them. It does not matter how terrible a foe might be. If the gods want Ghazghkull to win, they will simply buff him mid-fight, essentially cheating. Ghazghkull is not an orc. Ghazghkull is something completely different. But back to our question, a normal Primarch is so much more greater than a normal human. So too is Ghazghkull so much greater than a normal orc. But comparing Ghazghkull to a Primarch is not fair, because Primarchs, as mighty as they are, do not have a direct line of connection to the God Emperor of all mankind. But do you know who does? Saints of the Imperium. Now, how exactly Imperial Saints get their power, how exactly it works, well, we don't exactly know. Some believe there are different aspects of the shards of the Emperor's psyche that are embedded in people. Others believe that there are different aspects of the Emperor reborn. Truth be told, we don't know. But what we do know is that Saints of the Emperor have a direct psychic connection to the Emperor and are blessed by his power. They have a line to the Emperor. And we are capable of seeing just how powerful a normal Imperial Saint is compared to a normal human. Saint Celestine versus Sister Battle, mind you, the difference is night and bloody day. That is what Ghazghkull is to another orc. So then, comparing Ghazghkull to a Primarch is not fair, because Ghazghkull is not just the orc Primarch, as some people have put it. Ghazghkull is a demon orc Primarch. A primed orc. Also, I don't want to hear anyone talking shit about that. The orcs literally call their shit cyborgs, alright? So I'm in the fucking naming scheme, okay? And we've seen what demon Primarchs can do, with Angron literally being unable to die, Motoran being able to wield the full might of Nurgle's diseases to make a god-killing virus, Magnus being able to transport planets in and out of the Immaterium, like it was very much so child's play. That is what a demon Primarch is capable of. And that is how much more a demon Primarch is than a regular Primarch or a regular human. Ghazghkull is that, but to an orc, which, newsflash ladies and gentlemen, is so much more powerful than a normal human. So basically in all, that Ghazghkull is a primed orc, and yes, I'm going to keep on calling that because it's easier than explaining it fully. But why? Why on earth would the gods make something like this? It's clearly not bloody easy, but why would they? What is the purpose of Ghazghkull evolving into this? And ladies and gentlemen, something that is surprising to everyone and should scare everyone. The gods of the orcs want more than merely just the fight. For the great gods of the orcs shared their vision with their prophet, and it is a hell of a thing. The orcs kept coming, and they kept getting bigger, until even the ronts among them were as big as the war bosses on Urk. And above it all, way up, on what might have been the cavern roof, or been infinity, the stars were coming out. More stars than every mech on Urk could have counted in a lifetime, and every one of them that bright, angry, beautiful green. Up above now, where the green stars shone, there were warriors, huge orcs, perfect orcs, everyone bigger than a clan chief, and rippling with green light. I don't know how, I knew. But there was orcs as they was meant to be. They glowed bright enough to outshine the stars, and they strode through the sky. I could feel the gods above them, grinning down in violent pride. Then clashes and booms and roars started coming from up ahead. The giants were wading into a scrap. It was hard to see what was going on, given I was looking up from between the flanks of galloping squiggos. But it was a big fight. It kept getting bigger, and I think the orcs won. Surely, they couldn't have lost. But then, when the noises of the fight faded away, the presence of the gods did too. It was like the whole cavern got cold and dark again, like it had been to start with. The squiggos stopped in their tracks, and so did every other thing in the whole of the Great Green. It was like everything was lost suddenly, looking around and wondering what to do now. Of course, they started fighting. It was a frenzy above and below, from the giants trading punches like common strikes in the sky, to the snotlings wrapping skinning claws around each other's necks down below. And with no guard to bang everyone's head together and tell them to pack it in, it went on until the whole place was like a butcher's tent, and there'd been enough murders for survivors some space to have. It weren't peaceful then, but it weren't a bloodbath neither, because all the really odd things, like the orcs in the sky, were dead. It went on for ages like that. There were orcs still, but they were nothing like the colossal fighters who had been before, and they was all stuck down on the cavern floor. Watching them was watching a bit like raindrops get swiped away by trucks' hatch wipers. Every time one of them got big enough to seem like it might make it up to the sky, all others nearby ganged up and beat it into shreds, so none of them got as big as they should have been. This was a vision given to Ghazghkull by the gods. This was a vision of the war in heaven. What Ghazghkull saw were Orks, the way that orks should have been, mighty, strong, and something altogether different. We all knew that Orks were something so much more than the orks ever could be, not only in power but in capability and in very understanding. But here Gaz mentions orks like stars, and this is what the gods show Ghazghkull, because this is what the gods want to bring back to the orks. The gods, Gork and Mork, are alive. They were created back in the days of the Old Ones, possibly by the Old Ones. Because whilst our understanding of the Great Green is that the sheer Gestalt consciousness created by the Orks gave form in the warp, perhaps it was something different. Perhaps the gods were not meant to be gods as such, but rather generals, leaders. Perhaps the Old Ones created Gork and Mork to be the two great war bosses. And most notably from that excerpt, it says when the gods went away, no one was there to rein the orks in. We know that the end of war in heaven, the immaterium and the materium, had been separated at least in some fashion. And we consider that all the ork entities associated with the warp, the great star orks, were also destroyed in such a fight. The Orks devolved into the orks because there was no one to rein them in. There was no warp entity to guide them, be it these so-called star orks or the great orks themselves, Gork and Mork. And this led to the orks devolving into lesser creatures. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to Ghazghkull Mag Urk Thraka. The great green gods want to use Ghazghkull to empower him with their warp energies to the point that he can bring the orks back into what they should be. Gork and Mork want to use Ghazghkull as a tool to make the orks Orks again. That's why he is indeed the prophet of the war, and possibly the first of many that could be Ork. For it is the will of gods that the great warriors of the Old Ones return. This is a fucking big deal, mind you, because Orks are wow. So, ladies and gents, after dropping that massive bomb of lore on you, to answer the question, could Ghazghkull defeat a Primarch? Yes. Yes, he could. Because the gods will only allow Ghazghkull to die when they want him to die. And should a Primarch overpower him in a fight, well then they'll just give him a buff right there. Because he is none other than Ghazghkull Mag Urk Thraka, the great green prophet of the war. And this question is rather pertinent because according to Mr. Big Green himself, he plans on having a good old scrap with them big Yumis. So this is death, is it? I've had worse. I need not die, not if I do not will it. My enemies did not die when I took their heads, nor when I took them again. Not because they were tough, because you did not will it, because I did not will it. Now I wish for death. If I did not, I would not bear this wound. But what comes next? The thing you've shown me. It is vast. It is great and violent and sacred. I will have it for myself. You showed me where to carve the path. And here, in this place, is where it narrows. This thin curtain, this death, is all that stands in my way. How frail it is. I will tear it down. I will breach its gates, as I have breached every gate before me. I will tear down its walls, as I have torn down all walls. Conquest has made my body strong, too strong now I see. The blood clings to my veins, and will not cool fast enough. It defies me. So I snarl, and my anger finds voice where I should have none. If my blood will not cool, then it will burn, and I will go to you in flames. I am moved now, my head held up by the hand of the enemy. It regards me as it lifts my remains, and I regard it in turn. There's triumph on its face. This thing thinks it knows victory in defeating me. It thinks it knows power, but for all the plate it wears, for all that it has done to make it into a thing of war, it is vermin. I study the bones beneath its skin. I see how its body is gnarled and swollen, how its whole self has been made in the hope it might hold onto the stars in the name of a dead god. It is a vain hope. Those stars will burn green in the end. The vermin is dying, I see. Even with such mild wounds, it is like a joke, I think, as it bears its feeble tusks like a poor copy of an orc, twisted together from the parts of a weaker beast. But you made us right the first time. Not even the Primarchs, the peak of their dead god's work, could be as perfect as the lowest part of the Great Green. The anger swells now, as the vermin holds my head up in the broken temple, and I think that I had to die today. Annoys me. But why could it not have been a Primarch? That fight I would have relished. I crave that fight, but I cannot have it, and it makes the embers of my anger glow white with rage. In time, it brings the thunder beneath the plating of my skull. I howl as it pounds down on me from my center, and the world begins to come apart. This is not death. Not yet. This is worse. Lightning flashes where there is none. Shadows split into colors I have never seen before. I see corpses twist into the shape of fungus, and I see the stone walls breathe. I taste acid brightness, and hear the running of wild beasts in the dark. Suddenly, there is bellowing and shouting in voices I cannot understand. It comes from everywhere and drowns everything. I do not know if they speak to me, or if they are me speaking to someone else. I am lost in a desert with a shattered skull, and I do not know who or what I am. I am afraid. But then the voices speak at once, and I make sense of them at last. They are your voices, and I know this. I can make words of them, as I have long yearned to do. I seize the mighty voices in the storm and I listen. I hear you now, and myself returns to me. The end is near, but I do not feel weak. I feel stronger than I have ever felt, because beyond this, there is something new, something terrible, something perfect. My rage does not fade, but it has become bliss now. The bliss an orc should always feel. It is a shame that I did not get to fight a Primarch, but I will, in time. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, Ghazghkull could definitely beat a Primarch. Hell, he could definitely beat a demon Primarch, because Ghazghkull is not just the greatest orc warboss that had ever been. He is the vessel for the orcish warp might of the Great Green and the brutal and cunning gods, Gork and Mork. And he is not just the first ever return to a Krork, but he might well very be the one to return the entire orc species into the mighty Krorks they once were, the perfect orc. But regardless of whether you are Krork or orc, us green boys always ready for a scrap. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for watching. I do love and appreciate you. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you guys think down below. How do you guys feel about Krorks coming back, about this idea that the gods are trying to get back in the band? Do you think that the orc gods were created as generals? Do you think that it's a scaled consciousness? What do you think about the whole star orcs? Were they some type of warp orc entity, or was it just bluster? Love to hear your thoughts down below. I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, and even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Massive shout out to my officer corps, starting at the captain tier, Miss Tori. We then have our lieutenant tier with Mr. Eddie V3, Miss Major of the Void, Mr. Curtis Studies, and Miss Tori. Massive shout out to my sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Warsmith the Fireheart, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Bowen, Mr. Sean RL7, and Mr. Matthew Merrill, Mr. That Guy. Massive shout out to my corporal tier members, Mr. Tremaine the Math Kitty, Mr. Lord Rosarius, Mr. Tech Priest Toaster, Mr. Bowen, Miss Shauna Smithers, the Gentle Salamander, the Wench of Warhammer, Major Doshinet, and Mr. Edward King. And finally, but absolutely not least, shout out to my amazing private tier members, Mr. Thomas Moslons, Mr. Ivan_SBW, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Ayeda, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Fortisunum, Mr. CMD Nay, Mr. Eric Massaro, Mr. Dom Marek, Mr. Ken_Sakura333, Mr. Morally Bankrupt, and Mr. Matthew Peter. Thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. 7-day with membership, get a bunch of awesome benefits, behind the scenes stuff, early access to these videos, member-only exclusive content, and exclusive roles in the Discord. The Discord is back. It's up and running. It took me a while, but I wanted to make sure things were in proper order. So join the Discord. It's an awesome banging community. You get to hang out with your boys, other like-minded people of the Rangers, and yeah, you just have a good bloody time. But whether you join the Discord, whether you sign for your memberships, it does not matter to me, because whether you give your boy $1 and not a moment of not of your time, I will love you just the very same. Mwah! But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you all so very much for watching. Y'all sure to say hello there, boys and girls. And I shall catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers! Also, if anyone complains about the fact that I use a very classy voice for Ghazghkull, he speaks High Gothic in perfect accent, so fuck you.